All right, folks, Republicans are frantically trying to come up with enough votes to pass a $1.4 trillion tax reform bill by today. They're still actually writing the bill. Joe, really? So everybody knows what's in the bill because they're still trying to actually write the bill. Joining us on the phone, Congressman Bobby Scott from Virginia. Congressman, it has been quite interesting watching this whole thing go back and forth because, frankly, we normally do what the hell on Thursday. I think that's an appropriate statement for this tax bill. What the hell is in it?
Well, we don't know because they keep changing it. They've got other changes. It's good to talk to you, Roland. And they're using what's called dynamic scoring. Dynamic scoring. We usually do budgets with arithmetic, but dynamic scoring allows you to throw things in and make stuff up. One of which is they're trying to get people to believe that the tooth fairy is going to pay for it. You don't have to pay for it because the tooth fairy is going to come up. But one of the things that I like to emphasize is how big this thing is. 1.5 trillion with a T. 1.5 trillion in deficit. You remember last year when Bernie Sanders had a free college plan, $900 billion? That's 0.9 trillion. People said that was so extravagant as to be ridiculous. 0.9 trillion. They're going to spend 1.5 trillion and not bat an eye. And when they do that, there's going to be no money left for education, transportation, human resources, or anything that's necessary. And if you're going to try to do growth, this is the worst way to do it. I mean, tax cuts. If you got a business, you're not going to hire people just because you got a tax cut. You're going to hire people when you need new people. If you don't need new people, you can just pocket the money. If you give a 50, and it's all weighted to the rich, they can say what they want. 80% of the benefits go to the top 1%. 80%. 80% go to the top 1%. If you give a guy that made $1 million, $50,000, if he wanted a car, he would have bought the car. If he needed a refrigerator, he had already bought the refrigerator. He's going to pay off his credit cards, max out his 401k. He's going to buy some stocks. He's not going to spend it, but if you give 100 low-income people $500, they're all going to spend it. And so it's the worst way in tax cuts to do it. If you want to grow the economy, do infrastructure, build some roads and bridges, or invest in jobs or or better education. That's how you actually grow the economy. And so, and I tell you, to show you how big this thing is, there are less than 10 million people unemployed, drawing unemployment. You can hire everybody drawing unemployment today with a $50,000 job for less than $500 million. $500 million. I mean, you can get free college, hire everybody with a $50,000 job that's unemployed today, and still not hit $1.5 trillion. This thing is absolutely absurd. I serve as the ranking member on Education and Workforce Committee. We've looked at it. There's nothing in there to increase Pell Grants. There's nothing in there to lower interest on student loans. As a matter of fact, they actually increased the cost because they removed the deduction for interest that students are paying.
Congressman Scott, hold tight 1 second. I'm going to go to a commercial break. I want to pick this up when we come back. Republicans are moving hard today to vote on a tax reform bill they desperately need to take back to their voters to show by them controlling the House, the Senate, and the White House, they could actually get something done. Maximum pressure being applied by Donald Trump as well as Republican leaders to make this possible, even though senators are on the record as saying they don't fully know what's actually in this tax bill. Critics say it is going to put more taxes on the middle class. They say the wealthy will get a massive tax cut. Also, that corporations are going to be able to take that money and enrich their shareholders and not increase the wages of their workers. Congressman Bobby Scott from Virginia, he's the top Democrat on the House Committee on Education and the Workforce. We continue our conversation with him. Congressman, first and foremost, again, when you begin to get into the details of this bill. Yesterday, Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio ripped it on the floor by saying it's not going to help workers in Ohio or in Michigan or in any of those places. He said at the end of the day, companies are going to give that money back to their shareholders. In fact, Gary Cohn, the White House economic advisor, he actually sat before a group of CEOs. And when the question came up, how many of you are going to take some of this savings and return to your workers or use it for infrastructure, few hands went up. They made it clear we're returning the money back to our shareholders.
Well, when they say they're going to create jobs, it doesn't make sense. If your business can produce all the products that are being ordered and you get a tax cut, you're not going to hire people. You can get the work done. If you get some orders you can't fulfill because you don't have enough workers, you're going to hire the workers and not lose the profit. You're going to hire the workers whether you get a tax cut or not. The tax cut is irrelevant to the decision, and everybody knows that. That's why the hands didn't go up. They can't know what's in the bill because the Joint Tax Commission, the Joint Economic Commission, and the CBO just revealed that it's going to have, even with dynamic scoring, $1 trillion in deficit. And you get people who've been prancing around for decades saying how they're fiscally responsible, or trying to figure out how they can pass a bill where 80% of the benefits go to the top 1%. We're not going to spend the money and not going to grow the economy. How that's consistent with what they've been saying, and they're kind of trying to figure that out. But even with that, most of the people in Sherrod Brown's district and my district and districts around the state, around the country, aren't going to get anything. And they're going to lose more in benefits because when the tooth fairy doesn't show up, they're going to cut Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. They're going to cut education and housing. And so the people who don't get anything are going to end up losing because they're losing benefits. When sequestration comes along and they have these across-the-board cuts, if we don't get the budget straight by January, they're going to be across-the-board cuts. More people are going to lose by cutting programs than they're going to gain in a little tax cut they may have gotten. And that's what people, the reason they got to pass this quickly is because the longer people get to read it, the worse it gets.
Michael.
Congressman Scott, Michael Brown, how are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Quick question. Outside of the policy side of the tax bill, don't you also see a political problem that they have? I mean, the president.
Yeah, I mean, they're on. You like to stick to the basics and the numbers when you talk about a budget, but at least two of them are on public record, explaining how their contributors will be mad if they don't get the tax cut.
Oh, and I'm even talking more of a grassroots political problem on the Senate floor. You have the president that's talked about two of the three senators that are holding out, talked about them like dogs on Twitter, and now he's expecting them to vote for him or vote for his bill.
That's his lobbying technique. I think he can bully people into voting. I think what he's found and why they couldn't get a lot of their other stuff passed is you can't make people who are elected by the constituents in their district, you can't make them do stuff. You may have to persuade them that it's the right thing to do. But the idea that their contributors will be mad if they don't pass this thing, and at the end of the year they will have passed zero meaningful legislation in a full year, notwithstanding the fact that they have control of the White House, the Supreme Court, the House, and the Senate, and they still can't get a bill passed. And so some of them have said it doesn't matter what's in the bill, we got to pass something.
Yep.
And so and their contributors will be happy, and that's the politics of it. And that is just shameful politics. I mean, you're talking about people's lives, you're talking about the budget, you're talking about our ability to do transportation in the future, really create jobs. It's just atrocious.
Tiffany, then Bishop.
Okay. Hi, Congressman Scott. Tiffany Cross with the Beat DC. I have a question about the two members of color on committee, Senator Marco Rubio and Senator Tim Scott. You Republicans love to parade out people of color to talk to us about how this tax bill will benefit us. Tim Scott has said this is all about hashtag keep your money. Marco Rubio has championed the earned income tax credit. Can you, if you can, talk to communities of color about what those two provisions that those two senators of color are trying to put in the bill, if that will actually have a positive impact on people of color?
The earned income tax credit was one of the provisions that the Black Caucus fought for in the Clinton budget that did so well. It helps people at the lower end of the scale. And those are people that actually spend the money. And if you're talking about increasing the economy, that's where we're at place. So the earned income tax credit would be helpful. But in this bill, as it is now, people in the bottom 99% get so little that when you go to try to pay for it, you're going to lose more in benefits in health care, in education, in housing, and other human services. You're going to lose more than you possibly could have gotten. A few might benefit, but when 80% goes to the top 1%, 80% of the benefits go to the top 1% of the population, you know how lopsided this bill is.
I have a question.
Bishop, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for you. It seems like you're a congressman, or you're not a prophet. It sounds like a lot of negativity that you have about me getting my money back. I don't know that it's grounded, it's anchored in a philosophical approach to government business. Isn't this why we are at a standstill with your whole body getting anything done? You're taking ideological stands and levying accusations one against another. So I want to say for black people, I want my money back. And I believe that if there is an economic increase nationally, it will help everybody. And I don't think you've adequately addressed that issue.
Well, yeah, you're right. You can get your money back, and then how are you going to build a road if everybody keeps their money? How are you going to do education policy? How are you going to build schools if everybody keeps their money? I mean, there's some things as a society that we can do better together than everybody at the same time. And so we have the tax structure we have. The question is how are you going to change it? And if your change is to give tax cuts 80% to the wealthiest people in America and expect the other 99% to be better off, you can't explain how they're better off if you're cutting their Medicare and Medicaid, how they're cutting your Social Security, or how you're cutting back in education and housing.
You're very eloquent. But are you having this dialogue with the Republicans, or are we at a standstill?
It's hard to have a dialogue with the Republicans because they're not fact-based. I mean, they just make up stuff. They say it's going to improve the economy. This plan is the worst way to improve the economy of everything on the board. Low-income tax cuts can improve the economy. Infrastructure.
That's ideology, sir.
Education spending can improve the economy. Upper-end tax cuts are notorious for their inability to actually expand the economy.
Well, first of all, let's say this here. One of the reasons that this vote is delayed is because it's about $1 trillion off in terms of income. Second of all,
wait a minute, Roland. That's with the Tooth Fairy dynamic scoring. With arithmetic, it's 1.5 and more because they cut off a lot of the tax cuts after year 5, and they say, well, everybody knows we're going to expand them. Okay, that means it's going to be worse than 1.5 in the ditch.
So what you also have, and Bishop, you want to speak to this here, so now you have all this conversation about, well, we're going to have a trigger just in case the economy doesn't do well. I'm not buying it. I mean, I think what's going to happen is, and in fact, Speaker Paul Ryan, Bishop, has already said it. Their deal is they're going to immediately pivot to spending cuts. Well, here's the deal. If the and then Bishop, I want you to answer this, and I'm going to go to Congressman Scott. If the economy is improving after what President Obama put in place after the disastrous 2008, 2009, economy is improving. Isn't this the wrong time for a massive tax cut? Shouldn't you be looking at this thing differently? Because when you have 37 out of 38 economists say you're going to put the country in a position where inflation is going to rise, now you're going to have a bigger problem. Now what?
Well, I think the GOP believes that the atmosphere under Trump now is expecting more growth, and that these things were promised, such as tax cuts. So all of us are going to have to deal with, are we dealing with conjecture or projection that's ideologically based?
No. But
real numbers?
But Bishop, if this tax proposal, which they admit is going to add $1 trillion to the deficit, I thought these were the folks who've been yelling for 8 years under Obama, lower the deficit. So how can the very people yell for 8 years under Obama, lower the deficit, and then turn right around and go, hey, raise the deficit.
That is certainly inconsistent. But I think what the real issue is, I think for people of color, is this. If you have shortfalls, what's prioritized and what's cut? And I think that's where conservatives always talk about entitlements, and those things are on the table to be cut. So I think
that's exactly right. And when you talk, we don't have enough money for hurricane relief. We don't have enough money to fix the pension problems around the country. And the original plan was to cut health care, Medicare and Medicaid, about $1.5 trillion out of Medicare and Medicaid, so people would have less insurance coverage, and then have enough money to pay for the tax cuts.
What we don't have agreement on, I'm sorry, but what we don't have an agreement on is the priorities of what is financed and what's cut. So I'm all for.
Wait, let me finish this point.
Okay.
The first plan was to cut health care to fund tax cuts. They didn't cut the health care. They're paying tax cuts and say we don't need to pay for it. When the tooth fairy doesn't pay for it, where do you think they're going to go back to pay for it? It's going to be a cut in Medicare and Medicaid.
I hear.
You call those entitlements. Most people call it life-saving health care.
I hear it, and I'm a cancer survivor. I shouldn't even be here. I understand about the need for health care more than most, but I agree with you. It sounds like there needs to be a come to Jesus moment with both parties to talk about priorities of spending.
But Bishop, you said you're a cancer survivor.
Yeah.
You got Senator John McCain, who's going through cancer treatment, who's going to support this plan. Tell me if I'm wrong, Congressman Scott. That's going to cut Medicaid payments for cancer.
And Medicaid for cancer, Medicare for cancer, and cancer research, so that maybe we've got in our area of the state, we're doing cancer research that has the potential. They're about to go into trials to cure many cancers. I mean, to reverse the cancers. And so, it's a matter of priorities. And nobody's ducking from the debate. The priority is, shall the top 1% get 80% of a $1.5 trillion tax cut, or should we improve health care for people?
Congressman Scott, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Roland. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir. Real quick, going on our panel here. This is what's basic for me. If you have 37 out of 38 economists say not going to help, if you have overwhelming number of Americans who are against this proposal, if it's going to add $1.5 trillion to the deficit, why are they trying to pass it?
So they can go back home and say, look what we did. We gave you a middle-class tax cut, even though that's not the case.
And they're desperate for a legislative win. I mean, I think this president is making people an offer they can't refuse. He can't go into Christmas break and having failed on every initiative that he's put his political capital on.
Bishop, that's what bothers me. That we got to pass something. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, again, the impact on the economy, and we do know that if this economy does not move according to their projections, they're going to turn around and say, we're going to slash and burn left and right when it comes to entitlements. And that's my problem. My problem is, somebody telling me for years, deficits, the Tea Party, deficits. Oh, we're in charge now. We're going to raise $1.5 trillion. It's all good because we're going to have all this robust economic growth and it's going to all work out.
Well, I think the GOP has got to have some coherency in what they're trying to do.
Okay.
I think that's key.
So
it's obvious it's not a strategy.
Do you support the GOP's tax plan?
I support the tax plan, yes.
Why?
Bishop, how?
I just told you why.
You don't know what's in it yet.
Yeah.
You're still writing it.
Well, here's the point, to my point. I think there is not a coherency in terms of what's prioritized, and I think there needs to be a rethinking if the GOP is going to be relevant in the next decade of what things they leave on the table and what things are broadly labeled as entitlement. I believe that limited government is good. I believe I want to keep more of my money, but how do you do that and balance the budget, as you're saying? And I think they've got a real problem there, and that's why there's a tug of war with folks saying Mr. Trump is not a real conservative, And I think there needs to be a
So then, where the discord is this this trigger mechanism? So where do you fall?
I don't understand. No, I mean, I just don't. I'm sorry. You can't yell for 8 years, deficits, and now you're about to add $1.5 trillion to the deficit, and you're trying to convince me it's a good idea. I'm sorry. To me, it is the equivalent of the moral majority saying for the last 40 years, character and values matter. Okay, fine. I mean, okay, fine, Roy Moore. Okay, you got banned from a mall, and you allegedly was messing around with a 14-year-old, and then you can't definitively say you were not with 14-year-olds, and now you want to believe that you actually are a Christian warrior. I'm sorry. I can't. I mean, yeah. I'm sorry. I can't buy it, and that's my problem here. So hopefully by today, we'll actually see a finished bill, so we'll know what's in it. But maybe not.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.